you're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Let's talk about the most fascinating news developing right now and how it affects us here in the Pacific Northwest. We call it Front Page. And Jane C. Hu is back. She's a journalist and host at CityCast Seattle. Jane, thank you so much. I can't believe it. So first time you had a good enough time that you agreed to come back. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I'm back. And thank you for having me, Libby.
So we're going to turn now to our top story.
This video shows a man in an orange hoodie surrounded by unmarked cars with red and blue flashing lights being patted down by what appears to be immigration agents wearing tactical vests that say police.
That's a report from King 5 on several ICE arrests in Redmond last year. New data paints a picture of how much federal immigration enforcement has been accelerating in recent months here in Washington state. This comes from friend of the show, Jake Goldstein-Street at Washington State Standard. He reported on data gathered by Berkeley researchers. And I'm going to go through some numbers here, Jane. And I know, we talked about this a little bit ahead of time, but just so folks can follow, there's going to be a lot of numbers flying around. We're going to try to give some context here. Federal immigration authorities arrested over 2,100 people in our state in about a 5-month period that started in October and ended in early March. So that is more than half of the more than 3,800 immigration arrests in Washington since Trump got back into office. For some comparison, during the 14 months when Joe Biden was president, from mid-January 2023 to early March 2024, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, arrested about 2,200 people in Washington. From October 2024 to early March 2025, so that same 5-month period, but last year, under both Biden and Trump, ICE arrested fewer than 400 people. So basically, we are looking at, in a similar period, just a year later, about a 500% increase on immigration arrests here. So I know that there's been a lot of developments on the immigration enforcement front, and I wonder what stands out to you the most.
I mean, just comparing those numbers from 2023 to 2024, I think you said, 2,200 people were arrested in that time, compared to a 5-month period more recently, roughly the same number of people, 2,100, right? Like a difference of 100 people. That's quite significant. I mean, I know that people really have tuned back in to ICE arrests in the last few months, but to show that the numbers also back that up, that it's not just that people are talking about it more and having more attention on it, is really important data to have here.
Yeah, I did do some back of the napkin math just because Washington has not seen that surge that we saw in Minnesota, in D.C., in Los Angeles, Chicago. And the same Berkeley researchers released a lot of data on a lot of different states. And so in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, where we have seen one of the surges, and obviously Trump has also brought in the National Guard there, they have a population of about twice what we have here in Washington state. But they had more than 5 times the number of arrests during the same time period that Washington saw. So as significant as it is here in Washington, what we're seeing, a definite acceleration, at the same time, there is kind of this sense that other areas of the country really have been hit harder. I was also interested to see that compared to the rest of the country averages, we have seen a relatively lower proportion of arrests here in Washington with criminal convictions. So it's like not the biggest difference, but it does look like, especially in recent months, after Minnesota and after there was the huge backlash, you kind of saw the federal government do a little bit of a retrenchment, a little bit of a retreat, and a higher percentage of those arrests happened to be people with, criminal convictions after Minnesota. But we haven't really seen that in Washington, and still a very low percentage have criminal convictions here.
That's interesting. I do wonder how these agencies are getting information could play into that at all. I think, as you might already know, Libby, like the UW Center for Human Rights put out this report in January about how these agencies are getting information from our government agencies kind of through the back door a little bit. And it's unclear to me if they fixed most of those loopholes, but essentially it allows these agencies to be using to compare license plate information to their records. And I think that can make it easier to try and target people without already having a criminal record or some kind of conviction that they could be trying to find people on.
There was the flock camera backdoor, too, the automatic license plate readers that a number of jurisdictions around the state had a backdoor accessibility for that data to be uploaded basically to national registries where ICE and CBP could access them. And then a lot of those cities, Redmond was one of them, realized that, shut those cameras down. We've seen at least one jurisdiction open their flock cameras back up, start them back up again, but remains to be seen how many will actually do that. Really quick before we go, we do have the legislation that passed here by the legislature that bans federal agents, any kind of law enforcement, in fact, from using face masks. Now, King 5 has reported, and others, predicted this when the legislation was passed, that immigration enforcement is still wearing masks. This has been reported anecdotally a number of times around the community. I mean, what do you make of that?
I remember when I first saw this bill, when we covered it on CityCast, I read the bill and we talked about how this was going to be enforced because the bill did not really have much in there at that point about it. Turns out it's enforceable only if someone brings a lawsuit. And we can't be relying on that. That seems like such an onerous way to try and get people to do the right thing.
Yeah, the TNT, the Tacoma News Tribune, which I think I'm supposed to call the News Tribune, but I still call the Tacoma News Tribune. Yeah. They spoke to the Attorney General's office, who, gave them an explainer. The spokesman there says, quote, "The law does not empower Nick Brown's office, the Attorney General's office, to be the enforcer. Instead, it provides a private cause of action for individuals targeted by masked law enforcement operations." So, quote, "For example, if a deputy sheriff illegally wears a mask, they can be sued by an individual that they target, regardless of whether the elected sheriff disagrees with the law or says he will not enforce it." That's a spokesperson with Attorney General Nick Brown's office. So how many people arrested by immigration enforcement are going to have the means, the wherewithal, are even going to be in the country to be able to sue an immigration enforcement agent who arrests them while masked? I
imagine they have bigger concerns like getting out of detention. And I always think of that meme of DW from the show Arthur, where she's standing in front of a sign and she says, "This sign can't stop me because I can't read." Like, I don't feel like having this law on the books without any teeth is going to really convince people to act differently.
Yeah. Let's move on to story number 2 on Front Page.
Caterpillar has a long history of human rights abuses and terrible practices throughout the world, primarily in Palestine.
So that is Diana Fakhouri, who is an organizer with the Palestinian-led political advocacy group Washington for Peace and Justice. And she's talking about why she and others pushed for Caterpillar, the farming, tractor company. Is that what they do? Caterpillar? They do
so it turns out,
and yeah, what else?
I think that's how we know Caterpillar. But it turns out Caterpillar also makes some war machinery, like many construction
companies do. Oh, they do military
do.
Contracts.
Yes.
So really quick, Diana is basically a part of this group that pushed for Caterpillar to be removed from our state's portfolio of bonds. And, this is something that flew under my radar. Washington State, has a treasurer. I knew that. I don't think most Washingtonians know who the treasurer is or really, has like a deep understanding of what they do. The treasurer is basically like our investment banker or our money manager. And the treasurer recently made some headlines. And Jane, you covered this for CityCast. So what did the treasurer Mike Pelliciotti do and why?
So Treasurer Mike Pelliciotti just decided to sell $62 million in bonds, divesting from the construction company Caterpillar. So this came after an ESG analysis. So if you're not familiar with ESG, it's an environmental, social, and governance analysis where basically the state wants to audit its holdings to make sure that it complies with our state's wonderful values. And Fakori was telling me that generally speaking, when the state does like an ESG analysis or really any government entity, a lot of the time what they're paying attention to specifically are the environmental impacts. But in this case, a group of advocates, including Fakori, brought to Pellicciotti's attention that Caterpillar has this long history of human rights abuses, especially in Palestine. And the local connection here is, so Fakori is the director of the Rachel Corrie Foundation. If you all aren't familiar with Rachel Corrie, she was crushed to death in 2003 by a Caterpillar bulldozer that was being operated by 2 Israeli soldiers in Gaza. And since that time, her family has not received any kind of accountability for that murder. She was a U.S. citizen. She was a Washingtonian. She was born and raised in Olympia. And she was there in
Just
Gaza.
graduated from Evergreen College, or was currently a student, I believe. So yeah, it was a huge story at the time.
She was very young
in high school. Yeah, super young. It was very impactful.
Yeah. And Caterpillar has been used in the West Bank since the 60s to destroy homes and infrastructure, as well as in Gaza. And there have been reports that they've crushed Palestinians to death as well. So this group approached Pellicciotti initially just because they wanted to talk to him about the other companies that are on the BDS list to try and talk about their concerns. And then they found out that he invests the state's operating funds. And when they asked him for more info, apparently they asked if he had any Israeli bonds. He said he did not. But then when he went through the corporate bonds, he found that Caterpillar was in there. And they focused on trying to get him to divest from Caterpillar. And interestingly, he said when they announced that they were going to, sell these $62 million in bonds.
He did it. I mean,
yes.
he just a few weeks ago, this was an announcement that he was selling those Caterpillar bonds.
Right. Yeah. When they announced this, they said that the decision was not based on ethics. It was based on risk. And I feel like that's what's really interesting here. I asked Fakori what she thought of that and what makes this investment risky at this point. And she was saying that there have been other divestments from Caterpillar in the last year, like $30 million divested in Alameda County in California, $2 billion divested from the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is like the largest pension fund in the world, and like another $400 million divested by a Dutch pension fund. So just even in the last year, seeing all of these large entities suddenly taking their money out of investments of Caterpillar has created this kind of just financially precarious situation for this company where our state is also just like, maybe we don't need to be invested in this company.
Yeah, and Pellicciotti, from what I understand, is basically like, this is not a divestment. This is a sale of the bond because there was a risk presented by these huge amounts of sell-offs from, like you said, Alameda, Norway, the Netherlands. One thing you mentioned that the protesters, the activists who are trying to get basically this divestment from these companies said is that Caterpillar has a history of human rights abuses. And I think that that's kind of where this gets sticky, right? Is because I think Caterpillar would basically say, like, we sell things to governments, to militaries, to people or whatever. And, what they do with them is not our, work. It is not our human rights abuses, right? If you have a quibble or a really serious human rights argument about something the Israeli government is doing, then you should take it up with the Israeli government or the U.S. government for supporting that. What do you think about that? It's such a constant debate, especially when it comes to Palestinian rights and Gaza. We saw that with the divestment movement at UW over Boeing and wanting University of Washington to separate from Boeing because of the military contracts. And that was something the University of Washington refused to do. What do you think about that debate?
Yeah, Boeing was the other company that came to mind for me where, they have specific contracts with the Israeli military to build warplanes. And I mean, I think it's one thing you can make the argument that sure, what people do with your product is kind of up to them. But when there's this repeated behavior where you keep selling the same machinery to the same people who keep using it for the same things, you start to see a pattern. I know that in talking to Fakori, that Rachel Corrie's parents have approached Caterpillar, and basically Caterpillar has never taken any responsibility for their hand in this, and I think continues to do business with the Israeli military.
I mean, we see the same kind of debate with, guns companies after there's a mass shooting or things like that. When I was speaking with the former UW president, Anna-Marie Kause, her argument basically is, we elect governments and they are accountable to the people, and their policies reflect, a democratic process, right?
In an ideal world.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But companies who, we basically don't want to put companies in the position of being the ones that we expect to uphold, our, ethical boundaries or whatever. Like, governments should be responsible for that. That was her argument when we were, went back and forth about why University of Washington did not divest from Boeing. Really quick, producer Maliha did reach out to the treasurer because I was curious. So we sold off these bonds with Caterpillar. What else is in this account that the treasurer maintains? And this is something that the treasurer's office manages for the state of Washington. It's different from our pension funds. This is an account that has $35 billion in it. Some of this is like operating budget stuff. So the treasurer got back to us, and here are the other companies that they listed. I'm just going to list this. Not all of them because there's like over a dozen, but Visa, Costco, Procter & Gamble, Colgate, Microsoft, Apple, Walmart, Amazon, JP Morgan Chase, Toyota, any more that's MasterCard, Bank of America, NVIDIA, Alphabet, so Google, basically.
Well, clearly no other controversial companies.
Right. Yeah, I know. And it just kind of, it's interesting because, again, there's a lot that can be said politically about a lot of those companies. And I think the treasurer is trying to have clear boundaries by saying we're not divesting because of political pressure, right? We're divesting because it's a financial decision, and that's it. Because I'm sure he doesn't want to see a situation where every single company on that list, you could probably have, people who want to see a different investment, right?
I don't think it is part of his job to consider his personal ethics in what the portfolio should be. And I mean, yeah, it seems very difficult to create an investment portfolio that is hopefully going to make money over time without investing in some companies that people probably find problematic. Like, I mean, you get into questions of just how do we overhaul this entire system? And that's definitely above my pay grade.
Yeah. I don't generally look at my index fund, but my retirement is, definitely gets involved in some controversial things. Okay, moving on to our final story, and I just want to have a little fun with this here. Our final story on Front Page. Here it goes.
I was staring at the sky, just looking for a star.
Okay, obviously that's Fiona Apple's Paper Bag. And we're playing it because I just want to take a moment to salute a kind of madness that we saw that appeared to, from far away, seem to take over Megan Sealing at The Stranger recently. She really had a bone to pick at with Fred Meyer and Kroger because Fred Meyer has handleless paper bags now. It's a kind of torture device. I ran into this at the Fred Meyer on Aurora, at 185th and Aurora recently. They replaced the regular handled paper bags. And Megan is not happy with this. She wrote about this on The Stranger, the disappearing handles. She went on this reporting quest to try to find out why they replaced the handled bags. And spoiler alert, she does not find an answer to the mystery, Jane. But she does kind of narc on Kroger for like not labeling their bags correctly for
so good.
Yeah.
Don't make
ecology.
a journalist mad. They will get to the bottom of it, or at least put you in a position where you have to defend yourself for this tiny indignity. But it does seem to matter. Like, I mean, I've seen people online saying, why do we really even care about the handles? Like, they're kind of not great handles anyway. I know.
Those people are wrong.
It does matter. Like, you need to, I think Megan actually wrote this in her piece, that they were convenient when I'd be out for a walk and decide to grab a few groceries at the last minute. I could carry multiple bags in one hand, so I still had a free hand to carry a coffee or take a picture of a window cat or dig out my Orca card while walking home or jumping on the bus. And I mean, same. I love to have just, if I forget my reusable bag, sometimes I'm a bad Seattleite, it's nice to have the little handle.
It's humane is what it is.
Yes.
You can't, you grab the side of the bag to lift it. I mean, you can't hold as many bags and just, trying to like hug them to your body while you walk down the street with no handles.
I will say it looks very 1960s or 1950s, like where you have the movies of like a housewife with like a grocery bag in the crook of her arm.
Further proof that mid 20th century America was not necessarily better for most people. I just want to again salute Megan Sealing. She did not get the answers that she was looking for. She did find that a number of bags at Kroger's allegedly did not have the Department of Ecology required labeling, and she went back and forth with a spokesperson. I do find it kind of scary that Kroger just refused to answer any questions about the handles because this is something that a lot of customers will wonder about, and apparently the checkers at Fred Meyer are very eager to tell you to fill out the customer, the customer survey at the bottom of the receipt. But I just really quickly, this is the opportunity to tee off on all the ways in which shopping has become way worse, especially grocery shopping in recent years. So Jane, what are the gripes that you have?
Okay, one is specific to the Greenwood Fred Meyer, which is the escalator and elevator are always broken. So God forbid you need like a home good that's in the downstairs. You gotta like leave your cart hoping that no one's going to take it off somewhere else, thinking that you've abandoned it. Go rush around downstairs and then carry all that stuff back upstairs and then put it in your cart. But the other two things that I think are more general. One is the indignity of having everything locked up. And I feel like I can never predict what is going to be locked up. Like sometimes it's laundry detergent, which I think is fairly common. But I remember being at a grocery store and for whatever reason, they had the makeup wipes locked up.
What?
And I was like, these are $5 and I do not understand why this product specifically needs to be behind bars. And then, of course, these folks are overworked and these stores are understaffed. So you're just sitting there being like, I'm just going to stand here for 5 minutes.
Press the doorbell and you have to wait for the screen to be removed. Yeah.
And I don't want to be annoying and keep pressing it either. And then the third thing is people who check your receipts at the door. I find that it's very variable in whose receipts they check and how closely. And even when they check, and I have the same gripe about Costco, honestly. And I know that Costco isn't in the same kind of surveillance world that a lot of the smaller grocery stores.
Yeah, that's been Costco life forever.
That has been Costco life forever. But I'm just like, what are you all doing? When you look at the receipt, unless you are just like, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator. Like, how are you scanning this and comparing it with what's in my cart? You're not. This is just
intimidation.
It's security theater in the same way that TSA has been for so long.
Just really massive kudos to Megan Sealing at The Stranger. Thank you for trying to get answers from Kroger. The quest goes on. And thank you for being back on Front Page today.
Thanks for having me, Libby.
Jane C. Hu is the host of CityCast Seattle and a journalist here in Seattle. Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime right here online at KUOW.org, or of course on your favorite podcast app.